Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. And today we're going to get into something that sounds kind of complex, but I promise it's totally fascinating. We're talking all about neuro-linguistic programming.
NLP.
NLP, exactly. And I got to admit, when I first saw this outline, it was like, whoa, this is intense. But, the more I looked at it, the more I realized it's like a user manual for your brain, wouldn't you say?
I'd absolutely agree with that. It's really about understanding how our brains work, how we use language, and how those things connect to our behaviors. And the cool thing is that once you kind of get a handle on those connections, you can actually start changing things in your life.
Okay, so right off the bat, this outline kicks off with, what is NLP? And it sounds like it's not exactly brand new, right?
No, not at all. It's been around for a while. It goes back to the 70s. Two guys, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, they were really interested in therapists who were getting amazing results with their clients. So they were like, okay, what's the secret sauce here? And they started studying them, not just what they were saying, but how they were saying it, their body language, the whole 9 yards.
So like they were trying to crack the code of successful therapy.
Exactly. They were looking for those patterns, the specific ways these therapists use language, and just how they interacted with people to help them change. And from all that, they developed this whole system of techniques and models, which is what we now call NLP.
Fascinating. Now, one of the core principles mentioned here is this idea of maps and territories.
Right, yeah.
It sounds kind of philosophical, so break that down for me. Like, what does that even mean?
It is a bit philosophical, I'll admit that, but it's also very practical when you really think about it. Imagine, like, you're on a road trip with a friend, and you both have maps, right? But your map is like super old and shows a road that doesn't even exist anymore, but your friend has an updated map so they don't run into that dead end.
Yeah.
Well, NLP says that our beliefs, our experiences, everything we've been through, all of that creates a map of the world in our minds.
And sometimes those maps don't quite match up with the actual territory of reality. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. That's why you can have two people go through the same experience and they have completely different reactions to it. They're each looking at it through their own unique map, you see.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see how this could lead to like conflicts, misunderstandings, all sorts of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Just think about couples arguing. Many times they're both convinced they're right because they're both looking at the situation through these totally different maps. It's like they're speaking different languages almost.
So how do we use this map idea to actually make things better?
Well, that's where another principle comes in, and it's called the map is not the territory. NLP encourages us to be a bit more flexible, to realize that our maps are just representations, not necessarily the absolute truth. They're models, but they're not the thing itself.
So it's about not getting stuck in our own way of seeing things and trying to see things from other people's perspectives.
Exactly. And honestly, that can be so powerful for communication, for relationships, even just for navigating life in general, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. It's like realizing there are many ways to look at something, not just our own way.
Right.
Okay, so the outline also mentions rapport. Now, how does that fit into all of this NLP stuff?
Rapport. That's a big one. It's all about building connection and trust, right? But in NLP, we take it a step further and look at how to understand and, to a certain degree, mirror the other person's communication style, their body language, even their word choices.
So it's not about being a copycat, but it's about finding ways to, connect on a deeper level.
You got it. It's like finding that common ground and building that sense of understanding. I mean, think about a time you really clicked with someone. Chances are you were unconsciously mirroring each other, creating that sense of rapport without even realizing it. And NLP helps us bring that process into our conscious awareness so we can use it more intentionally.
That's really interesting. It's like NLP is about understanding ourselves as much as it is about understanding others.
Absolutely. It goes hand in hand. I mean, You can't control how other people communicate, right? But you can become more aware of your own patterns and how those patterns affect your interactions.
Okay, so let's get into some real world stuff here. How are people actually using NLP out there?
Well, one area where NLP is really making waves is in personal development. People are using it for all sorts of things like boosting their confidence, getting over fears, or even setting and achieving goals, just getting better at getting what they want.
Okay, that all sounds amazing, but how does that actually work? What are some of the specific tools that people are using to do this?
One technique that's really popular is visualization. It's basically about creating a really clear mental picture of yourself succeeding, almost like a mental rehearsal for whatever you want to achieve. And it might sound simple, But when you do it right, it can actually start to program your subconscious mind for success.
So you're basically tricking your brain into thinking it's already achieved the goal. Isn't that something athletes use a lot?
It is. Athletes use visualization all the time, and it's the same principle. It can be just as effective for, everyday goals. Say you have to give a big presentation and you're feeling kind of nervous about it. Instead of focusing on all that anxiety, you could visualize yourself up there, totally killing it, feeling calm, collected, and the audience is engaged, loving it.
So I'm literally picturing myself up there giving this amazing presentation, and everyone's just glued to every word I say.
That's the idea. And the more detail you can put into that visualization, the more vivid you make it, the more powerful it's going to be. And the key is to really feel the emotions you want to experience when you actually achieve that goal.
Okay, I'm definitely going to have to try that. So what else is in the NLP toolkit?
Well, there's another technique called anchoring. It's all about connecting a desired emotional state, like feeling really confident or motivated, and linking it to a specific trigger.
A trigger? Like what kind of trigger are we talking about?
It could be a word, like a power word, a touch, even a physical gesture, or a specific image, anything that works for you. For example, you could choose a word, let's say, focus. And then every time you say that word to yourself, you think about a time when you felt super focused and productive, like you're in the zone and things were just flowing. And you repeat this process over and over until that word becomes an anchor that automatically brings up that feeling of focus whenever you need it.
So you're saying I could create a whole library of these anchors for different situations. Like I could have one for calm, when I'm feeling stressed, energized, when I need a boost, things like that.
Exactly. And the more you use them, the stronger those anchors become.
That's pretty cool. Now, the outline also mentions that NLP is being used in workplaces. So how does that play out in the real world?
It's mainly about communication and leadership, really. NLP can help people tailor their communication style to be more effective with different personality types.
Yeah.
Not everyone communicates the same way. It can also be helpful for resolving conflicts, for negotiations, and for building stronger teams.
So it's not about manipulating people, it's more about understanding them better.
Yes. It's about understanding and then adjusting your communication style so you can actually get your message across in a way that resonates with them. Let's say you're leading a team and you've got one team member who's really visual.
Right.
They respond well to images and diagrams. Then you got another team member who's more auditory. They need to hear things explained verbally. NLP gives you the tools to figure out who's who and how to talk to them in a way that makes sense to them.
That makes total sense. It's almost like speaking their language, literally and figuratively.
Exactly. It can prevent so much miscommunication and frustration, when people are just talking past each other because they're not on the same wavelength.
Right. Oh, yeah, definitely. Now, I've also heard about NLP being used in therapy.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Is that like a legitimate application of NLP? How does that even work?
Therapists use NLP techniques to help people break free from those negative thought patterns, to overcome phobias and fears, and even to work through past traumas.
Wow, that sounds pretty intense. Is it like as effective as traditional therapy?
It can be, but it's really important to remember that NLP isn't a replacement for traditional therapy. It's more of a complementary approach, something that can be used alongside other therapies, kind of like adding another tool to the therapist's toolkit.
So it's another tool they can use, but it's not the only tool.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. The outline even mentions sports. I mean, how does NLP work for athletes?
Think of it as mental conditioning for athletes. They use NLP techniques to improve their performance by learning to manage their mental state, visualizing their success, and overcoming any self-doubt they might have. It's all about getting in the zone and staying in the zone.
So it's not just about physical training, it's about training your mind to support your goals as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the key takeaways from all these different applications of NLP. It's recognizing the incredible power our minds have to shape our experiences and our outcomes.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. We really can control a lot more than we sometimes realize.
That's right.
Okay, so NLP clearly has a lot of potential benefits, but I'm guessing there's also some skepticism out there. What are some of the criticisms people have of NLP?
Well, one of the main criticisms is that there isn't as much, hardcore scientific validation for NLP compared to some other therapies. And it's important to approach it with a discerning mind, right? Not everything you hear about NLP is going to be accurate or effective. It's not a magic bullet.
So it's about being a savvy consumer, doing your research, and not expecting miracles overnight.
Exactly. Find qualified practitioners, understand what the limitations are, and figure out what works best for you.
Okay, that's good advice. We've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about what NLP is, its core principles, and some of the ways it's being applied in different areas of life.
And we've touched on both the enthusiasm and the skepticism, which I think is important to have a balanced view.
Right. So for someone listening to this, why should they care about NLP? Like, what's the takeaway for them?
I think the biggest takeaway is that NLP gives us a framework for understanding how our minds work, how we use language, and ultimately how we can use that understanding to create positive change in our lives.
So it's not just a bunch of random techniques. There's a deeper philosophy behind it.
Exactly. It's recognizing that our thoughts, our language, and our behaviors are all connected.
It's all intertwined.
It is. And by understanding those connections, we can become more intentional, more intentional about the way we interact with the world and with ourselves.
So it's about becoming the authors of our own stories, in a way.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. It's like once you understand the operating system, you can use the computer more effectively.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. NLP is like a set of tools for programming your own mind, right?
In a way, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's about becoming more aware of your own mental processes and figuring out how to use them to your advantage.
This is pretty empowering stuff. It means we're not just victims of our circumstances or our old habits. We actually have the power to change them.
That's a big part of the message of NLP. It's about taking responsibility for our own thoughts, feelings, and actions.
And then using that awareness to create the life we want.
Precisely. It's about recognizing your own potential and using the tools of NLP to unlock it.
Now, before we wrap up, you always have such great insights that go beyond the material, so I have to ask. What's a thought that comes to mind about NLP, something that we haven't really touched on yet?
Well, it's interesting that we've been talking about NLP as a way to change our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, right?
Yes, that's been the main focus, for sure. Making positive changes.
Right. But what if we look at it from a different angle?
A different angle? What do you mean?
What if, instead of trying to change ourselves all the time, we use NLP to better understand and accept who we already are?
Oh, wow. Now that you mention it, that makes a lot of sense. We're so focused on self-improvement these days that we sometimes forget about self-acceptance. Tell me more.
Well, think about it. NLP gives us this amazing insight into how our minds work. It helps us see how our thoughts, our language, and our behaviors are all connected.
Right. But instead of using that knowledge to try and force ourselves into some ideal mold, maybe we can use it to appreciate our own unique way of being in the world.
Exactly. It's about using NLP as a tool for self-discovery, for really understanding your strengths and your weaknesses, your own unique patterns of thinking and behaving.
So instead of saying, oh, I need to change this about myself, I can say, okay, this is how my brain works. Now how can I work with it?
Exactly. It's like saying, okay, this is how I process information. This is how I interact with the world. How can I use that to my advantage?
I love that. It takes so much pressure off. Like, NLP can be a tool for self-acceptance just as much as it is for self-improvement.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important message, especially in a world that's constantly telling us we need to be different, we need to be better, we need to be more.
It's so refreshing to hear, hey, you're already pretty amazing just the way you are. Let's explore that.
Exactly. And use NLP as our guide on that journey of self-discovery.
That's beautiful. Maybe by understanding and accepting ourselves more fully, we'll naturally start to make changes that are more in line with our true selves.
Changes that come from a place of authenticity, rather than self-criticism or judgment. That's where the real magic of NLP lies.
So instead of asking, how can I change myself? Maybe the question becomes, how can I understand myself better?
Exactly.
And NLP can help us find those answers.
Wow, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. I feel like we've only just begun to explore what NLP is all about.
It's a vast and fascinating field, and there's always more to learn. So, for everyone listening, I highly encourage you to dive deeper into NLP. Explore what resonates with you, experiment with the techniques, and see how it can impact your life. And maybe even consider how it could be used to make the world a little bit brighter.
It's definitely a journey worth taking.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
So, we were just talking about self-acceptance. I'm wondering, could NLP also be a tool for, societal change?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah, if NLP is all about understanding communication and influencing it, couldn't it be used to, bridge those divides between people, help them understand and connect with each other, even if they have different viewpoints.
If you think about it, a lot of conflict comes from just plain miscommunication and having these different maps of the world like we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
So yeah, theoretically, NLP could be this powerful tool for like building bridges and helping people have more constructive dialogues, even if they don't agree on everything. It's like, instead of trying to get everyone to see the world in the exact same way, maybe we could use NLP to help them at least appreciate and understand where other people are coming from.
Right, exactly. It's about finding that common ground, even when it feels like those maps are like miles apart.
So NLP could be a force for good, not just in our personal lives, but in the world as a whole.
I think it's a possibility, and it's definitely worth exploring. I mean, we've seen how it can help people transform their own lives, so why not apply those same principles to groups, communities, even nations?
That's a pretty amazing idea, and it actually connects back to what we were saying before about self-acceptance, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe if we can help people understand and accept themselves more fully, that'll naturally kind of ripple outwards and create a more understanding and accepting world.
It's a beautiful vision, and I really think NLP could play a big role in making it happen.
This has been incredible. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of NLP, though.
Oh, yeah. It's a huge field. There's so much to learn and explore.
Well, to everyone listening, I definitely encourage you to dive in, explore what resonates with you, try out some of the techniques, and see how it can transform your life. And hey, maybe even think about how it could be used to make the world a little bit of a better place.
It's a journey worth taking, for sure.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.